to this meeting of the Mid-Sussex District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Jonathan Ashworth, the leader of the council. I'm joined today by members of the Cabinet and the senior management team who have their videos on, and by Democratic Services staff who have videos off, and a number of other councillors who are also observing, again, with their videos off. I'm going to begin by doing the roll call, and then I'll turn to Mr. Clark in a minute for the virtual meeting explanation. So can I first invite members to confirm that they are present, please? Councillor Belsey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Demir.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hillier.
Present.
Councillor Wellenberg.
Present.
Councillor McNaughton.
Present.
And Councillor Webster.
Present.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And I'll now ask Mr. Clark to do the virtual meeting explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This meeting is being held in accordance with the virtual meeting regulations that were published by the government in April. They run on now until May unless extended. Members have control of their own microphones and will be called to speak by the leader as chairman of this meeting. An upgrade of Zoom, as many of you are aware, means that we no longer have the for or against voting buttons. So when we come to any vote, it will be by the hands up. If the vote is not unanimous, the chairman will ask for those against. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Item 2 is to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Are there any declarations, please? Councillor Belsey.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I need to declare a prejudicial interest in the fact that I am chairman of A2K East Grinstead District, which is obviously relevant to item number 8.
Thank you, Councillor Belsey. So you won't be taking part in item 8. Thank you. We'll leave Democratic Services officers to move you into the waiting room for that item. Thank you. Item 3 is to receive any apologies for absence. I don't think we have any. I think we're all present. So item 4, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of November, which are in our packs, colleagues. Can I ask you to use the raise hand button, please, if you are happy to agree those minutes? Thank you, that is unanimous, and so those minutes are agreed. We'll move on to item 5, to consider any items the leader agrees to take as urgent business. And at this meeting, we do have one item, which is the Anstey Village Centre Trust release of Section 106 money urgent report. And I'll turn to Peter Stewart, the Head of Corporate Resources, to introduce this paper. Mr. Stewart.
Sorry, Chairman, actually that'll be the Business Unit Leader, Emma Sheridan, to introduce this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for agreeing to accept this report. The report requests release of Section 106 money to the Anstey Village Centre. Funds were received from the developer on the 29th of January, which was after the deadline for papers for this cabinet, which is one of the reasons why it's come forward as an urgent paper. The funds are required for works that are required to meet tight planning timelines for completion of stage 1 of the build of the new village centre. And funds have been collected specifically for this purpose and this organisation, so can't be used for anything else. Because of the level of sums involved, it does require a cabinet approval. And members, I know, will be aware of this project and the progress that the Village Club have been able to make throughout the pandemic. So we are keen to be able to support and facilitate the ongoing forward momentum of that project. I'm very happy to take any specific questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that introduction. Colleagues, who would like to go first on this item? Councillor Belsey.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much for the report. Obviously, I'm aware of the of the work that's been done with the Village Centre Trust, and the good aspirations that this will bring for Haywards Heath and Staplefield, and for many people around Mid Sussex, as part of the Cabinet Grants panel. And I know that we've already agreed about £500,000 worth of funding from our Section 106 monies to the site and to the works proposed. Obviously, another 198,000 is being proposed today. It's very sizable sum of money, but in particular, I was just interested in the total contribution that we're being requested for in respect to the social club, which is 98,000, of which we currently have about 74,000. So today we are being asked to award just over 74,000. I know that a lot of work has gone into raising funds from other organisations other than Mid Sussex, and I know that the team behind it have worked really hard to try and secure extra contributions. However, just in respect to the social club work with the groundsman store and the cricket nets, of the 98,000 at the moment, the match funding is only 5,000. There's a lot of comment in the report how the social club is working to diversify sporting activity, currently engaging with Sussex Cricket Foundation to support cricketing opportunities, also with the Sussex Football Association on providing a venue for women's football. It also says that our playing pitch strategy is endorsed by Sport England, and sort of part of the wider context for the project. There is a lot of support for the projects and what we're seeking to achieve, not just in terms of the diversification of sport and making it a sport for everybody. Therefore, I'm slightly surprised, just in terms of the social club aspect, that they've only raised 5,000 from outside the council, and that they're asking us to provide 98,000. Given we've actually already got the 74,000, and we're very happy to support the project, but there is possibly a limit as to how much of our Section 106 monies that we're actually able to contribute. And given we don't actually have the remaining Section 106 monies at this moment, which I assume means that another report might come before us in the future for the additional 24,000, I suppose my question would be, could we not just award the 74,000 today and ask the social club to use their strongest efforts for match funding or looking for other funding sources, like some of those organisations I've referred to above, to find the shortfall of the 24,000, as it is money that we don't already have, and it seems that there's a lot of encouragement for the project from elsewhere. So I think that would be my sort of observations, comments, and hope in terms of where it might leave us from a council perspective. Thank you.
Emma, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. As I say, the money that is earmarked against this has been specifically requested from the developer for this specific purpose. So if we don't use it for this, then we will have to potentially give it back. The other thing is, obviously, with their own fundraising efforts, like so many organisations, this council included, the impact of COVID has meant that the club have not been able to do everything that they maybe would have wished to do in the past year. A lot of the fundraising events that would be typically held for these kind of activities are things that are not possible under social distancing guidelines. In fact, they're now illegal. The club are keen to continue to fundraise when they are able to, and have done. The fact that they've raised anything in the last year with some of their best efforts has been good. They recognise that they do need to raise more themselves, and there will be other costs associated with the build and the fit out in particular that they continue to fundraise for. Officers support them with that through community leisure officers, and we will continue to do so. But I think we do need to recognise that this has been a very difficult year for all fundraising organisations, and it just has not been possible for them to do so. But they do remain committed to that ongoing fundraising.
Thank you, Emma. And I think, as Councillor Bells has noted, I think there is a strong track record here of fundraising, and so I'm sure we would hope that would continue as and when the restrictions permit it to. Councillor Demir, I've got you next.
Thank you, Leader. I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Belsey. And is your answer the fact that we will give them the extra 20 when asked for it? Is this, I wasn't quite clear.
Yes, there would be if we receive that funding, because obviously it's triggered by certain stages of development, then yes, that would come forward as an additional paper at that time. But that money, we can't award money that we haven't actually got in the bank.
Of course not. I do congratulate them on all their fundraising, which has been phenomenal, but I just felt that the extras, for want of a better word, fit out and things like that, they could continue to look for additional funding from Sports England and people like that. But we've already committed this extra money, have we?
It has been requested for that purpose, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, mine's less of the financial part. I've been through the figures, and obviously, had we not had a pandemic, I feel sure that there would have been lots more activities going on that might have been able to raise some of the shortfall. But at the end of the day, we have to realise that when we first agreed this, although I always think it doesn't say what it is, Anstey, village centre, a village club, but we know this is very important, not only for Anstey, but the rest, certainly the younger people across the whole district who come far and wide to play here at cricket, football, and all sorts of other activities. And I think it's just the pandemic that has got us into where we are. But this is going to be a major, it's an important development for the whole of Mid-Sussex. I, for one, I believe we should be funding it now to make sure it is up and ready. Having had my first COVID vaccination the other week, I'm looking forward to the lockdown ending, and let's hope everyone can get back to these centres, and let's hope the place is up and running in time for some good weather and people can get out there and play. And to see the kids out there rushing around and in active sports, I think is important. So I say the finances speak for themselves in here. It is a major project, and I think that we just carry on where we are. We've always understood that we would make up some of the money, and this, in my mind, is a marvellous opportunity to carry on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McNaughton. Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Leader. I agree with Councillor McNaughton. This has been a project that has been very long in the making, and I do think that we need to look to the future communities that the site will provide sporting opportunities to, and it will be for boys and girls, for men and women, and for disabled people, and also for spectators, because it is a well-equipped building and well-designed, and I think that it is an asset to a much wider area than one village, and I certainly will be supporting this application, and I hope that the people involved will be able to raise funds from a wider base very quickly, and I think a lot of that depends on the path of COVID in the future months. But I certainly will be supporting this particular recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Councillor Hillier.
Yeah, thank you, John. Just going to comment briefly. I guess, like many other people, get slightly frustrated when significant building projects run over cost. But that is just the way life is. And I still don't understand why the cost of relocating the cricket nets provisional figure hadn't been put into the papers presented to us back in, I think it was November 2019. However, this isn't a brilliant project. I think the trust have done amazingly well to raise coming up to £750,000 of funding. I note no contributions that I can see there from the Football Association, who I, as ever, despair of the way that sport runs itself. But having said all of that, yeah, this will be a great facility. I know a lot of people who go to Anstey to use it, particularly for the cricket, etc. And I'm happy to support the recommendations, albeit just yet another big project overrun. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thanks, members. I think important that we're able to support this recommendation. A huge amount of work has been done over a number of years to bring the new Anstey Village Centre to fruition. As colleagues have said, it will be a really fantastic facility, not just for Anstey, but for a much wider catchment area across the district. And I think particularly, Councillor Norton made the comment about the sort of post-COVID recovery and people being able to get back out and do sport and those sorts of activities. And I think this will be a great facility coming on stream to support all of those activities. And I pay tribute actually to the volunteers that have done a huge amount of work through the trust to get this project up and running and being delivered. It is really good to see, and very significant financial contributions and support from this council, and indeed putting to work the developer contributions that get made as a result of new development in the district. And I think it's always useful to just have a reminder on these sorts of projects that that money that the council collects from new developments goes to facilities like this being improved for the community. So it's great to hopefully see the last bits of money being spent, and hopefully looking forward to it being open in the not too distant future. So I'll take colleagues to the recommendations. In paragraph 5 of the report, the Cabinet are recommended to agree to the release of Section 106 contributions to award £128,040 to the Anstey Village Centre Trust, and to award £74,613 to the Anstey Community Sports Club. Can I have firstly a vote in favour of those recommendations using the raise hand button, please? Councillor Belsey, are you able to clarify your vote? It looks like you might be having some technical issues.
Yes, I had some technical difficulties, but I'm voting in favour, raising my hand.
Thank you very much. In which case, we have all 7 members of Cabinet voting in favour, and so those recommendations are agreed unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Let's now move on to agenda item 6, the draft corporate plan and budget for 21-22, and this time Mr. Stewart, Head of Corporate Resources, is introduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first thing to say is that the settlement has now been finally announced, and there are no changes between the numbers given in this corporate plan or draft corporate plan and what will appear in the corporate plan full in March for council. No changes arising from the settlement. There was a good discussion on the proposals, the spending and income proposals at the scrutiny committee, and the minutes, of course, are attached for your perusal. Where there has been a change, and it doesn't so much affect next year, 21-22, as future years, is in the area of business rates. Now, if you'll permit me a small explanation, a short explanation, the business rate system is designed to reward authorities for encouraging business growth within the district. The way we report that is looking forwards with what's known as a non-domestic rate 1 form, and then an imaginatively titled non-domestic rate 3 form at the end of the year, which then tells people what's happened after in the previous year, and there's a reconciliation and money moves backwards and forwards. We are at the stage right now of submitting our non-domestic rate 1, our NNDR 1 form for next year. And as part of that, it's a big form, requires populating with quite a lot of figures, which is drawn from the non-domestic rate database. As part of that, and we did appreciate what I'm about to say had already happened, but as part of that, of course, it crystallised in our minds that the Rampion substation, which I think is in Bolney, had come onto the valuation list last year. Its rateable value, and it must be, I haven't been there, so I'm assuming it's a fairly big site. Its rateable value is some £1.9 million. Applied against a poundage of about 48, 49p, I forget exactly which it is, gives them a bill of some £900,000. That is their bill every year for the Rampion wind farm substation. Under the legislation, dating back to some 2012, this money comes to us. Although it goes through the non-domestic rate system, it comes to us as a bonus, effectively, for encouraging a renewable energy site to site itself within mid-Sussex. Very good news, and it had, to be honest, it had not been appreciated within revenues or finance. It took our local government finance consultants, who we are retained and work with us every year on these matters, just to point that out. There hadn't been an error in the form, simply it had been in the wrong area. It had been in the wrong column. What that means is, for next year, and this would have happened regardless of which column the figure had been in, is that there's a bit of a bonus next year, and we need to revise our figures. So the figures before you in the medium-term financial plan on my page 9 at least, are that we were going to get an income of £3.4 million from non-domestic rate next year, 21-22. The actual figure we think we're going to get now, based on our projections, is £5.2 million. That's £5.2 billion. That's a £1.8 million increase. Because we've got Rampion, we've also got the DPD site, I think, over in Burgess Hill. It's not renewables, but it's still more and more economic growth. So next year, we have something of a windfall within the non-domestic rate system to the benefit of the district council. Which means that there's every likelihood that we will not have to use general reserve next year. We can exist on a combination of income, business rate, fees and charges income, business rates income, and council tax. It's excellent news for us because it protects our reserves. However, there's a bit of a but coming up now, I'm afraid. Inbuilt into the non-domestic rate system is a reset. And so far, and this system I think came in 2013-14, so far the government has not pressed the button for the reset. What a reset will do is strip out any growth over and above the sort of effectively a notional amount of need that the government thinks this council needs, financial need. And that right now is at some £2.2 million. So I think you know what's coming. It depends on the reset as to where the cliff edge falls. And the smart money right now is on a reset being triggered next year in 21-22, which then affects 2022-23. So our finance consultants are reasonably confident, as much as anybody can be these days in these rather uncertain times, that a reset will get triggered next year, which will lead to a reduction in our non-domestic rate income in the following year. Now, members, for council in March, I don't think members need to get too excited about the effect on next year. We're simply substituting general reserve income, effectively use of general reserve, for use of non-domestic rate income in 2021-22. Your spending plans, the council spending plans and income projections can carry on almost unaffected in 2021-22. But from 22-23, if the reset happens, and again, it's a big if, we will see our non-domestic rate income go down to some 2.7 million from 3.4 million pounds. And that will carry on every year afterwards. So it's a £700,000 a year extra draw on reserves that we predicted from that point onwards. So you'll see that brings forward the time, and I'll make this quite clear both within the corporate plan and I think within a short summary document to put out on the members' information service. Members will see that that brings forward the time when our reserves come down to unacceptably low levels. So it's still some time off, and we needn't worry too much about next year. As I say, next year is, unless there's a great amendments to the fiscal framework in the Chancellor's budget in early March, I think next year is pretty much as we've set out here. And I've always said that I think as we go further along and further out in years, we can become less and less confident. Well, unfortunately now we are becoming more confident, but it's acting against us because the income is not there to support your spending plans quite as set out right now. But there's work to do. So I think this week I will try and get an explanatory note out so that all members of the council understand where we are over the medium term. But as I say, that shouldn't affect your thinking about the corporate plan and budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that update, Mr. Stewart. So on the one hand, a benefit of the green economy and the green recovery, but what in the short term helps us is potentially not helpful in the long term. And actually, it's a real shame actually that the situation with COVID and the impact that's having on the budget sort of take away what would otherwise have been a bit of a windfall that the council might have been able to use for other purposes. But we are where we are with that, at least, as you say, the point at which the council needs to start drawing down further reserves is moved back a little bit to give us a bit more time to try and address some of those issues. I'll turn first to Councillor Llewellyn-Burke, Deputy Leader.
Thank you. It's a very uncertain corporate plan, isn't it? And quite a lot to get one's head around this change in the awareness of the renewable energies and also the longer term plans. Is there any certainty that we are able to keep the advantages given to us by the renewable energy rates? And I suppose I'm asking from the point of view that as my ward is Bolney Ward, which is affected by the renewable rates and the unhappiness that it has caused local residents. I mean, there will be some fear amongst them that the council will be, wanting to accept more renewables for the money, but of course the planning rules will override that, and of course it's up to me to represent the residents. But this will be by some people sort of seen as a bit of a bombshell in a way, because although it's a good thing for the council, I just wondered in the longer term whether they think we'll be able to keep the money, or whether it's a sort of swings and roundabouts. We've got it for the moment and we haven't got a crystal ball along with other incomes and expenditures we seem to have at the moment. Am I being clear enough, Mr. Stewart? Or...
I think so. I think the answer is that until the reset, the money is ours. And the legislation is phrased in such a way that actually even after the reset, we still receive the full £900,000. However, the effect of that is that other things start to happen and our baseline need gets adjusted. So it's not entirely all free money. But I think if you like, in the spirit, we will carry on seeing that £900,000 now flowing through until any scheme is amended. And I wouldn't rule out an amendment to the whole business rates scheme, as I wouldn't rule out amendments to business rates per se. I mean, without getting down a rabbit hole, there does seem to be an issue around business rates right now regarding physical businesses against virtual businesses, and that needs sorting out. So I think we'd all probably agree. But for now, at least, I can say that until the reset happens, we are doing very well out of the system. We have done well out of the system in the past few years. It's just the reset, which has been much vaunted but never delivered, will act against us. But there's no saying, of course, there is no saying that will happen in next year for 22, 23 either.
Okay, thank you. So we're secure for the next year, and then it's a wait and see, really, isn't it? Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, so I've got questions on the main paper, but I don't know if you want me to give those at the same time, or just in relation to the matter that you've mentioned, Mr. Stewart. First of all, I think a note going out to the members is extraordinarily welcomed and very important. Do we know at what point we will, or you will, get to know about the government decision around this? Is it likely to be at the same time of the year as the settlement? Because whilst, yes, everything is fine and we don't need to be concerned about next year, we know that financial planning in this authority, pretty much everyone others, is constantly ongoing. And as soon as April the 2nd comes around, or whenever it is, we'll be starting to work on the budget and planning for the following year. We need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with not dipping into our reserves overly come 23-24. So I'm just a bit concerned. Could you just, maybe in your paper or maybe now, help how the process of dealing with that is, and what the timing is in terms of when you think the government may advise us about this rates change? Is it going to be at the same time as the settlement, which is usually very late and difficult for us anyway, in December if we're lucky, and January quite often? I've got other questions, Leader, but should I do those separately?
Yes, I think so. If we do them, we'll come back to them.
So the quick response is we just don't know. The settlement, in my opinion, and many others' opinion, settlement would be far too late in the day. If there's one thing that local government has cried out for, it is a little bit more certainty, and I do appreciate that is a little trite in a time of a worldwide pandemic, but the ability to forecast over the medium term is vital, so that we can set out what we want to do. We certainly can't wait until December before finding out about a reset. And I do wonder whether the Chancellor has got some things up his sleeve actually for the budget.
Councillor, do you want to come
back? Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back on my other questions, if I may, in the substantive paper. On page 22 of the papers, this is table 3 under bullet number 28. This is just to explain some stuff for my own personal knowledge. There's a couple of figures in there. So if we look, second one down, corporate facilities for the cleaning of offices, which the pressure to the end of the December was 14k, and we understand why that's there. But then suddenly,
sorry to interrupt, but I think you are on the wrong paper.
Oh.
You're on the budget and corporate plan paper. I think you might be referring to the budget management paper.
You may be right, Leader, in which case I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Okay, I will come back to you on that item. Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Leader. I made some notes while various people were talking, and the sort of things that I wrote down were the reset, roller coaster, no free lunch, rabbit holes, swings and roundabouts, moving goalposts, and then I think the killer word in all of that is the word certainty. And sadly, we just don't have that at the moment. And I understand exactly where Councillor Llewellyn-Bourke is coming from, because that area of the district is particularly beautiful, and there has been development in that area, and I can understand the concerns of Councillor Llewellyn-Bourke and her residents, and we need to preserve the areas of outstanding natural beauty and so on of Mid Sussex, for future generations. And sadly, on the other hand, this is a project that will provide a very useful amount of money for us in the short term, and it will do a huge amount for the environment in the long term. So it really is a difficult situation that we are in. But I think as a council, we need to continue doing what we have always done, which is to plan carefully and to keep our ear to the ground and respond appropriately to any changes in the rules that come about from central government. And my hope is that we will get good notice of any changes that do come about so that we can respond and act appropriately in good time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demir.
Thank you, Leader. Hi. Yes, and thank you, Mr. Stewart. That was a very clear and concise explanation, and I'm grateful to you for that. Yes, just really a thought, if this reset goes ahead, will any thought be given to the amount of income, well, expenditure that we have made because of COVID? I know West Sussex, of course, have had their expenditure covered, whereas we have not had as much income coming in from the government force to help and support. Does that get taken into account at all? Probably not. Will make life difficult. And I guess we just plan for the worst and hope for the best. But I just wondered if for district councils who have had this extra expense, if any kind of thought might be given to being nice to us.
Yes, that would be lovely, Councillor Demir. I'm afraid that probably not. No, the answer is probably not. There are, so no effects, no account will be taken of any extra expense we've had to have, or our level of reserves, I should say, as well. In fact, you know, there's probably more factors against us than going for us, I'm afraid, in the future, because of course another feature of the non-domestic rate system, the business rate system, is appeals. There are still hanging over us the appeals from the hospitals who think they shouldn't be paying business rates. And I must admit that when the Rampion substation came onto the rating list, which was last year sometime, I did wonder why it was on our list at all. Because, for example, I think the Shoreham power station is part of what's called a central list. It's not put down to a district. And it wouldn't be inconceivable that at some point Rampion say, we don't think we should be on this sort of list, we should be on a central list, not a local list. And so that would change things as well. So I don't want to still start hairs running, as I say, but there is a lot of uncertainty and the rules can change. But all we can say is that for next year, we know where we stand pretty much next year. And we think we know where we stand in year 2, 22, 23. It's just that things might change until that year actually starts. There's lots up for grabs.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Colleagues, we're recommending a budget to council at an incredibly uncertain time, where making forecasts about what will happen next month is pretty challenging, let alone in a year's time. And I think it's important that we reflect on the fundamentals, which is that we have a strong track record of financial management, and we've sought to diversify the council's income base over the years to try and ensure that we're in the strongest possible position, because as with any organisation, the strength of the financial picture underpins everything else that we do. The pandemic's had a very significant effect on the council's finances as costs have risen and income has fallen. And it's probably still too early to know how much of that might bounce back as the vaccination programme begins to allow the government to lift some restrictions, and how much of that is a sort of structural change to the council's finances. Clearly, we've been able to keep the key services running during the pandemic, and are doing many more things to support the community and our local businesses through underpinning that from reserves. The deficit that we've got in the current financial year, clearly that's not a sustainable position indefinitely. And so, while the position for 21-22 is improved and welcome as a result of the business rates changes that Mr. Stewart has outlined, the medium-term position is still quite stark, and the forecasts in terms of the rundown of the council's reserves are completely unsustainable, and we will need to take action to avoid that being the case. But I think important not to underestimate that the challenge facing us over the next 2 or 3 years, even if the kind of immediate picture has improved. And before we go to the recommendations, I would just like to thank the Scrutiny Committee for their consideration of the budget, and colleagues have got the minutes from that Scrutiny Committee meeting in the papers that are always useful to have and to reflect upon. Mr. Stewart, are there any amendments to the recommendations needed as a result of what you outlined earlier, or are we okay just noting that will be reflected in the papers that go to council?
I think they can stand as they are. I mean, in 3, I don't think you don't actually need, depends what you call the short term. I suppose that 3 could be revised to say the strategy. Actually, I'll just take 3 out thinking about it. We don't need to use general reserve next year, but we do need to use general reserve as written for the following years after that. But for the short term, being 1 year, that could come out.
I wonder whether we should amend the word short to medium term.
Yes.
Okay, fine. In that case, I'll suggest that we move to the recommendations, and little 3 says medium term instead of short term. So, colleagues, the recommendations are there in paragraph 6, little 1 to little 5. I won't read them all out, but essentially we are recommending the draft budget and corporate plan for 21-22 to a meeting of the council for the full council to consider. Can I ask members to use the raise hand function to confirm whether they are happy to agree that? Thank you. I've got 7 hands up, so that is unanimously agreed. Let's turn now to item 7, which is the budget management progress report up until December 2020. And I'll turn to Peter Stewart, the head of corporate resources, to introduce this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There's not a great deal to say about this. I think the report does speak for itself. There are a couple of things I think to highlight. One is that we're looking at an overspend of some £1.9 million in the year. That's after, if you like, everything has been taken into account, both the COVID grant money and the sales fees and charges money under their scheme, the government scheme, as detailed in paragraph, summarised really in paragraph 3. That will have given us some £1.9 million for the year, which as a response to the pandemic was most welcome. In paragraph 4, we are proposing that we set up a fairly small reserve to finance the support to the leisure centres, which, as you appreciate, have been closed in this latest lockdown. And they are costly to close in the same way that they were a good income stream and a good business to run in the good times. I'm afraid that there is some support needed in the pandemic, and the £500,000 we're proposing to put in there, if you agree, would be helpful, so that you know exactly where the money's coming from. You're not worried about the impact on general reserve. There are 3 new capital projects listed in the report, quite minor, but hopefully will have an impact on the community they're serving. And finally, and it's a bit of a follow-on from the last item, I'm afraid, paragraph 5 does give a fairly clear warning that things will change. this won't be the final figures before you. We're finding that assumptions are, whilst useful, are rarely correct in the present climate. Whether we assume that people will come back to the car parks, or whether we assume people will go to leisure centres, we make an assumption one month and the following month we find that assumption has been wrong. So don't be surprised, please, if the overspend goes up or possibly goes down, depending on what happens in the rest of the year. All we do know is that we are going to be using the general reserve to absorb that blow, but we think it'll be around that £2 million mark, as we thought for some time, but it won't be exactly the figures we've got in there now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. I think important to note, as you say, the report goes to December, and we're now in another period where we know that there will be an adverse outcome on the council's finances as a result of the lockdown restrictions. So nothing we can do about that right now, but important that we just have that in our minds as we look at the report up till December. Councillor Wellenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question and a comment, if I may be permitted, please.
Of course.
So I've got a question for Mr. Stewart about item 21 on page 21, which is about the industrial rents and the pressures that are upon them because of COVID. And I wondered whether, in the light of the comment you've just made about uncertainty and seeing where things go, I mean, we've made a prediction to the end of the year. Do you think that we are, is there a trend that can be identified as to whether we're over the worst, or is it as it is? And I'm just concerned about future income, really, I suppose, is why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, I think we've heard from all those. I'll be bold and say I think we've heard from all those that are going to query their rents. I'd like to think that anyway. We are in constant contact with all our tenants, and of course, many people are weathering the storm. Many people have applied for grants. Many people haven't, and that's something else we need to turn our minds to at some point. Well, from now on, really, is to how we get more people to apply for these grants, because the figures are not as good as they could be. But in terms of our industrial estate rents, I don't see them going much down from here. I know the quarter day is coming up soon, but that will affect the next financial year rather than this one. So far, I'm happy to stand behind the figures we have here.
Thank you. That's great. Bit of optimism there then. Good. Thank you. And if I can make my comments, please, Chairman, about the capital variations. So the capital variations, although they are quite minor, they are all funded from the Section 106 monies that we have. And I'm very pleased that we're able to do this in the current circumstances, because as far as the Skeins Hill Recreation Ground, which is the first project, is concerned, we do need to keep investing in our recreation centres. They are so important for the communities, particularly at the moment where we are restricted. People can't travel far from their homes, and where possible, the recreation grounds can be used and a great outlet for children. The second project, which is a public art project, I think might be seen as controversial, because certain communities will be saying, well, we're struggling. Why on earth are you spending money on public art? That's something that we don't need. We can, why can't you spend it on something else? But that Section 106 money was specifically allocated for public art. So we have been obliged to find public art projects of the right quality and in the right location to spend the Section 106 monies on. So a lot of work has gone into that to make sure it is right for the communities in which it will happen. And the third aspect was, third variation was the John Peers Recreation Ground, which is an ongoing project from prior to the last election, and a commitment by this council to improve the facilities in John Peers and organise the gates. And I understand that this will be is a bit of a pilot as well to see how it works. So that's why that £9,000 is being spent, and it's from Section 106 monies. And thank you for bearing with me, but I just wanted to make it clear as to why we were spending those monies on those projects at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellenberg. Important points. Councillor Hilly, can I come back to you and the points you wanted to raise?
Thank you, that's very helpful. And also thanks to Councillor Wellenberg. I appreciate her comments around the capital spend. That was very helpful. Thank you very much. Right, so back to table 3 in bullet 28. This is the COVID-19 related pressures. I just was trying to understand why, as I say, under the second line down, corporate facilities, we had a pressure to the end of December of 14k, and now the end of the year variance is over the next 3 months is effectively doubled or just over doubled to 30k. And then a similar dynamic going further on down when we're talking about playground reopening, cleaning and signage, whereas the pressure was 30k to December, it's now 65k. I just wonder if you could help me understand why there's that order of magnitude of difference for effectively what are the last 3 months of the year. And then the other one I just wonder if you could help me with is, thank you, in between those leisure centres costs of reopening. There was a figure of 709k, and now obviously there's a provision of 1300. Is that because we are anticipating maybe having a reopening cost coming before the end of the financial year, or is that something different? Because obviously the costs of closure we're aware of in relation to our contractual obligations. I was just trying to understand that reopening cost, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, I'm afraid I don't have a detailed explanation of the movements of those 3 figures, and I suggest I set that out in a document instead. I can make an assumption really, which is that the expenditure is somewhat lumpy. In other words, that for example, playground reopening, cleaning and signage, I'm thinking the cleaning would be an annual, a sort of a weekly, monthly figure, whereas the signage would come in at one point. And I'm thinking that's coming between now and at the end of the year, but I don't know that categorically. And I say I'll have to set out an answer in writing if that's possible, please.
Thank you. Councillor, did you want to come back?
No, that'll be fine. I look forward to seeing that when you're ready. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Councillor Demir.
Unmuted. Thank you, Leader. And thank you. Oh, am I? Yes. I'm very glad to see that we are spending our 106 money on the arts. So well done for carrying on with that, Councillor Llewellyn-Buck. I just had one question, and again, it could be that I'm not reading this correctly, but we are now writing off the Horsham District Council's contribution, which is sad. It's a comment, perhaps, that they didn't feel that they should be paying that. And I just wondered if Mr. Stewart could at least reassure us that everything had been done to try and get them to pay. And the other thing, which I think Councillor Llewellyn-Buck touched on, was that on page 21, where she had commented on the rents on the industrial estates, we're saying the actual December were based on invoices rather than actual income. So have these now been paid, or are we expecting them to be paid? That's it for now. I can't find my other comment I made.
Chairman, I mean, for all income items, of most income items, apart from, say, the cash ones, we always recognise income when the invoice is raised. So if you don't get the income after that, it becomes a bad debt. It only becomes a bad debt, really, when you've gone through a certain sequence of events. And it takes some time to actually get us to write off a bad debt, you'll appreciate. Which actually brings us on to the write-off of this within the papers. Every avenue has been explored. I think it's fair to say that the other party was never wholly happy. whilst in the partnership, actually, and at the end of the partnership. And I think it is a sad day, I'm afraid, when two authorities don't quite see eye to eye. But as you'll see, one authority, to their credit, whilst we're not entirely happy with the situation and the partnership finishing, paid their bill in full, and the other authority neglected to do so. But there we are.
And the only other comment I would make was something you said, which is, yes, we do need, I think, we're only seeing about 30% of businesses looking to apply for this latest grant. So I'm hoping that more will be applying very soon. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I might be asking a silly question here because I think I should know, and I don't know what suddenly brought it to the front of my mind. We have listed what we've spent in acquiring other properties for temporary accommodation. Can I ask where we show the income that we do get for the temporary accommodation that we use? I've obviously missed it, and I just wondered, if we haven't started showing it, will we start to show any income that is derived instead of us spending on bed and breakfast, where we actually get income back where people are paying rent in temporary accommodation?
Yes, that's a good point, Chairman, isn't it? I think what we do is we effectively net it off our bed and breakfast expenditure. So we have a budget for, if you like, temporary accommodation, which is, let's say, £200,000 spent. It would have been £240,000, but it's now 200 because we're using our own temporary accommodation. So we don't treat it any differently, if you like, from our other expenditure on temporary accommodation. It just becomes a netting off figure. I can see Ms. Holmes agreeing with me there.
Councillor Morton, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The reason it came to mind, I look at the figure, you know, that we to acquire 5 more properties, and when we first worked this, we were going to declare an income, even if it's just a figure to say that we haven't spent on temporary accommodation, that we should actually show it, because it is the temporary accommodation now is an asset of the council, and we do derive some income from it. We would have been spending an awful lot more money on temporary accommodation if we hadn't got it. And I just think that, should we not be showing that by taking on the temporary accommodation ourselves, we've actually achieved a reduction to council costs and still got an asset? I just wonder if we're missing a trick by not showing it. It's probably a question to ask, and we can discuss this some other place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morton. Mr. Stewart, anything you wanted to add on?
Well, I think, Chairman, I'm not sure about adding any more detail into this report because it can get a bit long-winded. But I think what we could do, if it suits you, is to just have an MIS item, if you like, on the cost avoidance that we've managed to achieve. It wouldn't take as much for us to do that. Simply a figure. It'd be a good way of showing members that their investment is bearing fruit.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I think that'd be useful and important also that we remember that we're also talking about a much better service for the most vulnerable residents in our community, as well as that financial benefit. So very much two sides to that coin, but some important work being done there. Councillor Belsey.
Thank you, Chairman. And obviously I've listened with interest to the comments from other cabinet members, and some have already raised the leisure costs and the reopening costs, which we're right, or they're right to raise, just given the importance of running those leisure contracts is to our council. And of course we understand the importance of our leisure centres to our residents, and they're sort of vital for for them for well-being and hopefully in due course again for sort of socialising aspects as well. I just wanted to just check the position just on the I know we've put the reserve aside, which I think makes sense and will help give clarity to how much the leisure centre costs are, but just, I know we have also applied to the National Leisure Fund for hopefully a credit, which of course won't go any way to reimbursing us for the leisure costs, but I think it was about 285,000 or potentially about a month's worth of costs or so. I was just wanting to understand whether that was reflected in the budget process in the projected year-end variance, and so just grateful for thoughts on that. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm just flicking through the papers here, and I would say it hasn't been. No, we don't tend to count our chickens before they're hatched. If it had been, it would have been in Appendix A as a forecast saving. So it's not in there, which should then, if we do get it, reduce our use of general reserve. But so far we have not allowed for it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Hopefully we'll have news about that a bit shortly. I haven't got any other hands raised from colleagues, so I'll take us to recommendations that are on paragraph 6 of the paper onwards, little 1 to little 11. And can I ask members to use the raised hand if they are in support of those recommendations, please? I've got 7 hands raised, so those recommendations are unanimously agreed. Thank you very much, colleagues. And before I turn to agenda item 8, I'll let Democratic Services officers move Councillor Belsey to the waiting room, given his prejudicial interest. Thank you. I've had confirmation that Councillor Belsey is no longer part of this meeting, and so we will proceed with item 8, the Age UK partnership agreements, and I'll turn to Emma Sheridan, who I think is introducing this item.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a decision that has been referred, as is usual practice with partnership agreements, from the Cabinet Grants Panel, who have endorsed and referred to Cabinet for final decision this report. It seeks Cabinet approval to extend our existing partnership agreements with both the Age UK organisations that operate within the district, so Age UK East Grinstead and Age UK West Sussex, Brighton and Hove. The extension of partnership agreements with both these organisations, who, as members will aware, have been and continue to be critical to supporting our vulnerable residents through this challenging year and the impacts of the pandemic. This will bring the timeframes for those partnership agreements in line with those that we have with other community and voluntary sector organisations in the district. So I ask Cabinet to approve this extension, and of course I'm obviously happy to answer any questions that you might have about the agreement or anything else in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to the portfolio holder first, Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. As Emma has mentioned, this was considered at the Cabinet Grants Panel, and I'm obviously in support of this extension because it will bring these contracts into line with a number of other contracts. It is a big piece of work to review these contracts when the time comes, and I very much hope that it'll be done in good time to give some certainty to these organisations that are affected. I just have one comment really. In paragraph 10, it refers to Age UK East Grinstead and Age UK West Sussex. being funded to provide services to tackle social isolation and support older people aged 50 plus. Now, being just over 50 myself, I can imagine that most people in their 50s and 60s and perhaps even in their 70s would think that they could live independently by themselves and manage their own affairs, contrary to probably what most of their children think. But we are, I think this is a carryover from the years when Age UK actually had that as a corporate sort of point, that they were in operation to support people over the age of 50. But it doesn't lessen the importance of the work that the Age UKs do in Mid-Sussex and wider across the nation. And I'm sure going forward, we have many people who are feeling isolated and feeling lonely. And this work, I fear, will be even more important in the years to come. So after that bit of a ramble, Chairman, I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webster. I haven't got any other hands raised from Cabinet members, so unless anyone's going to do so now. Councillor Demir.
Sorry, thank you, Leader. I'm fully in support of this. If somebody could explain, perhaps Emma could, page 43, financial implications. West Sussex are conducting open tender processes for the renewal of the contracts post June 2021. This means that we're out of kilter with our grant funding. What if they don't get, am I asking a silly question? What if they don't get the contract and we've given them all this money? Or am I not understanding the wording?
You are understanding the wording correctly, Councillor Demir. Currently, West Sussex County Council are out to tender for a lot of services, of which one of the lots is this ongoing work that Age UK undertake. Those new contracts won't come into place until next year. We are, as Councillor Webster alluded to earlier, we have already started talking to all of our community and voluntary sector organisations about services that we might need, plans that they have post-COVID for the 2022-23 year onwards. Those conversations are already incorporating what happens if they don't get contracts from County Council. Realistically, I think we would expect them to receive some form of contract from county. We are aware, however, that will probably, certainly given the amounts of money that are factored into the current tender documents, it will be a reduction in the amount of funding. So we are talking to those organisations about how they're planning to alleviate that, what their mitigations are. What changes that might make to their services and their service delivery. What this 1 year extension gives us is the time to have those conversations, the time to plan with them together collaboratively to co-design services as we move forward, and to do so in the knowledge of what the outcome of the county bidding process is, so that we're properly prepared for that when it actually comes into force in the next financial year. I hope that answers your question.
It does fully. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I'll take colleagues to the recommendations then, which are in paragraph 6 of the report, which is to extend the Age UK East Grinstead and Age UK West Sussex partnership agreements until March 2022. Can I ask members to indicate whether they agree with that recommendation using the raise hand, please? Thank you. And I've got 6 raised hands, so that is unanimously agreed by all those members taking part in this item. I'll let officers let Councillor Darcy back into the meeting before I close it formally. Welcome back, Councillor Darcy. So that just leaves me to close the meeting, and thank you for your attendance and involvement in this afternoon's meeting of the Cabinet. If I could just remind Cabinet to just remain seated until the live stream has concluded. Thank you very much.